You're listening to Planet Inside, Series 1, Episode 2. I'm your host, Luke Gagan, and this week we're going to be covering one of my favourite stories of all time, called the Dybbuk Box. Now, in Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is a malicious possessing spirit believed to be the dislocated soul of a dead person. Now imagine purchasing something from an auction website that would ultimately change your life forever. Well, that is exactly what happened to Jason Haxton, director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicines in Kirksville, Missouri, author and current owner of the Dybbuk Box. The old Jewish wine box went up for auction on a popular website, eBay, where it became one of the most legendary items to ever be sold, and after hearing the mysteries behind the old box, Jason had to make sure he got hold of it. Jason first heard about the box from a young intern that was working for him at the museum. He had heard that the person who was selling it had purchased the box as a joke and liked to scare people with it at house parties, completely unsuspecting that playing with the box was going to make his life a misery. Jason started following the owner's blog to learn more about the item. Netschke had posted about how strange things started to happen to him. His hair started falling out, insects would gather in his apartment, electrical items would fail, and would have a terrifying reoccurring dream of an old hag that would attack him in his sleep. Netschke then posted to say that he could no longer suffer the wrath of the wine box, and decided to sell it on eBay. As soon as the item went up for auction, Jason watched and carefully chose his timing with the winning bid. Jason soon saw the strange effects of the Dybbuk box after bringing it home. His health started to deteriorate, including hives, coughing up blood, and head-to-toe welts. And just like Netschke, his hair started falling out, and he had to suffer from the reoccurring dream of the old hag. Jason also reported a constant smell of urine from the box, normally just before something bad happened. Not only did his health suffer, but the box started targeting his family, and Jason soon realized he had to take responsibility, and he took the wine box to the museum for safekeeping, away from his loved ones. Jason consulted with rabbis to try and figure out a way to seal the Dybbuk in the box again, to stop it from hurting anyone else. They advised him on old Jewish rituals, and he successfully put the Dybbuk to rest. Jason now keeps the box in a secret, safe location to make sure that nobody else can unsuspectingly release it. Jason then started to research the origins of the box, which led him to the original owner, a man called Kevin Mannis. Mannis owned a small antique store where he would regularly attend auctions to keep his store stocked up. One auction he bid for a lot, which included the wine box among other bits and pieces, which had belonged to an old Jewish lady that had recently passed away. Curious Mannis went to ask for more information about his purchase and discovered he was talking to the old lady's daughter. As soon as Mannis mentioned the box, she started to freak out and told him that they wouldn't accept any returns. Not thinking much about it, Mannis took the collection of items back to his shop. His mother's birthday was soon coming up, and he decided the wine box, after a few touch-ups, would make a great present. He secured the items in the cellar and went on with his business, leaving his assistant to manage the store while he was away. Not long after leaving, Mannis received a distressing call from his assistant, who claimed that someone was down in the cellar smashing the place up. He immediately rushed back to the shop, where he found that his assistant had left. He carefully moved down the stairs to see what had happened. Strangely, everything was still intact, except for all the light fittings. Glass was everywhere, as every bulb had blown and shattered across the floor, and he reported an overwhelming stench of urine that filled the large cellar. Mannis went to check the security gate, which was still safely secured. No one could have got in or out without having to have passed his assistant at the front desk. His assistant was so terrified, she refused to return. A few days later, Kevin's mum came to visit, and he gave her the present he had lovingly restored for her. As soon as she touched the box, she suddenly couldn't talk, lost control of her body, and suffered a stroke. After that, things went from bad to worse, as Kevin started to get sick and broke out in hives and boils. He was constantly harassed by the old hag as nightmares broke his sleep. It took him some time before he pieced it all together. He decided it was time to get rid of the box and to pass it on to somebody else to worry about it. It was his eBay listing that started the legend of the Dybbuk Box. After safely securing the Dybbuk Box, Jason had many meetings with Kevin Mannis, and he continued his research. He discovered that the original owner, the old Jewish lady that Kevin purchased the box from, was the sole survivor of her family during the Holocaust. It is believed that the woman trapped the Dybbuk in the box for revenge or other negative purposes. Jason's research delved deeply into the tragedies that the woman had faced and the history surrounding her story. Jason reports that he still occasionally gets the box out now and again, but thanks to the rituals performed on the box, it releases a sweet smell of jasmine now and again, almost like it's trying to entice him to once again open the box and release the Dybbuk waiting inside. Okay, time for a quick music break, and then coming up next, we are going to interview Jason Haxton and ask him a few questions about the Dybbuk Box. Don't go anywhere.
Why?
Welcome, Jason Haxton, back to the show. How are you?
Luke, it's great to be back with you. It's been a little bit of a time off and some new developments. Looking forward to providing a show for you and your listeners. Excellent, because I'm extremely excited to have you back on. I've got a lot of questions that I've been dying to ask you. So, first of all, let's talk about, has there been any real development since you published the book, since the movie was released, with your own research? Right. With my own research, to some degree, since the book came out, a few more details came through, a few documentaries that were on TV, particularly with a London group called, I think it was the Raw TV organization, who did the sci-fi show Paranormal Witness, the Dybbuk Box, and I think they actually did the best show. And actually, if you ever want to know more or really get into the Dybbuk Box, it shows all the key characters. It tells the main story in their words, and it's seamless and accurate. So again, I do think the best work has come out of London on the Dybbuk Box itself. Since then, what we've really determined is the Dybbuk Box is kind of a way to talk to a higher spirit, in a spirit that is, neither trapped by time and place, and therefore things can be asked of it and affect one's lives. And so I think when we pray, we pray often in churches and things to God, hoping to have some effect, some change. To some degree, that's what this box was created for, was to pray to or ask, to make a wish, which is really what a prayer is kind of about at its core, wishing for health or, protection. And in some ways, this was created as a way to meditate and kind of tune in and look for things. And so once we discovered what the Dybbuk Box was kind of about, it just so happens it was created to answer one prayer, but it has the potential to answer anyone's prayer. And so I think it's an interesting artifact in that sense. And so that's more of what we've come to the conclusion. It's not good or bad, but just as any wish can have consequences, so the Dybbuk Box, in moving to help and answer someone's prayer or wish, may in the process create things that are difficult in a struggle and therefore seen as bad, where in essence, I really see it as very neutral. It just accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish, and it's really in the hands of the asker how it turns out, good or bad.
So what would you say what would you say the cost is for a wish?
Well, I think if it's to yourself, it's probably some inner reflection, because what you're asking for might even demonstrate some of your own weaknesses. And so in the process, you might have to pay for that request. However, I find that when you typically request something that involves someone else or helping someone else, it still turns out okay, only it has no effect on you. So I guess I think it's the intent. So if you're looking for self-gratification, it usually comes at a cost. If you look at giving and caring and providing something to someone else needing, then that comes with no consequence. And the result is usually they benefit from your caring and your seeking a support or help for them through the Dybbuk Box.
Right. So have you opened the box recently?
The last time that I opened the box would have been about December. And what was happening at that time is so many people still want to have access to it. And of course, I live in the middle of nowhere, Greentop, Missouri. And even at that, the box was put away in such a way that the earth could draw whatever energy it had, good or bad. And so I've been pursued by a paranormal investigator by the name of Zach Bagans. You may be familiar with his show on the cable from Travel Channel. Ghost Adventures is his show. And he's been interested in the paranormal since he was just a kid. And he has acquired a massive amount of artifacts relating to occult, paranormal, and the supernatural, with the intent of someday creating his own museum. He's really well at that point now with his collection being kind of older. And he did an interview with me. Deadly Possessions was his show that talked about the Dybbuk Box, and I actually took it to him and we discussed it, which was kind of rare because it hasn't been out of the area since it arrived like 12, 13 years ago. And so he really was the first to have access to it. And after that, he continued to seek out getting it, that he wanted to present it, display it, make it available for people to know its story and see it. And I finally decided after a year of harassment that maybe he really was serious and the best source. So currently the real Dybbuk Box, all the research and everything has gone to Zach Bagans, who has this haunted museum that is not open yet, but probably very soon in Las Vegas. And again, he's legit, at least in his collection, and doing it right. And so I'm kind of free of the curse, so to speak, in that sense. It's kind of his to deal with now.
So has he reported anything strange?
Oh, he certainly did. He, of course, for this Dybbuk Box, he's really reserved 2 full rooms, one to house the artifact, the other to house its story that people can enjoy. And the designer from Hollywood movie sets that was creating this dramatic home for it fell very ill and really had a lot of issues. He said things like he'd had a haunted tricycle, maybe some child death or something. But what fascinated him is that once the Dybbuk Box arrived, the tricycle started ringing and pedaling its way through his, basically haunted museum. So things that were already haunted were taking on a higher and more strong dimension. And that's what he does. Exploding lights. Again, he hadn't had any problems in his museum, but once the Dybbuk Box arrived, which is one of its signature events, is that lights just explode one after another. And so he mentioned these things. The designer getting very, very ill. I gave some recommendations that I'd found. One is to actually use sea salt in a bath and then fresh basil. For whatever reason, that combination of the sea salt and basil and then smudging with sage in that area can kind of cleanse a person and free them. And so I certainly recommended that. And things seem to be better. He's still, like I said, getting ready to open soon. So there it is.
That's going to be interesting, especially to see if any of the visitors end up having their own experiences.
Well, and that's why he's going to have them. I mean, you have to be 18, so you have to be a legal adult, and that you will actually sign a waiver saying that you understand that they cannot be responsible for what happens with your interaction. So, I mean, he's taking it very serious.
So is the box going to be left open on display, or is it going to be closed on display?
Well, that's because it actually is in a protective case, an acacia arc, which is, the wood of, it's also called shittim, but it is the wood of King Solomon's temple and the original Ark of the Covenant that held the tablets, the broken tablets, and some other artifacts that were used by the Israelites to wage war. And so it's in a protective box lined in 24 karat gold, quite an expensive box. Cost about $8,000 to create.
Wow.
And so I don't know if he'll just have it in there open or what. I mean, that's really up to Zach.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to find out. So, Jason, are you familiar with a ghost box?
Not so much. I mean, I've heard of people using what they call ghost box apps to basically get EVP from surrounding areas. But what's a ghost box?
So yeah, it's essentially the same thing. I know that you can get app versions these days, but originally, my understanding of it is it quickly switches between radio channels, which allows you to communicate with spirits or demons, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
I personally don't know whether I believe in them or not. It's quite interesting to watch sometimes, especially when they seem to be getting answers that relate to the questions that they're asking, things like that. My main question was going to be whether you ever attempted to sort of use something like that to communicate with the Dybbuk.
Well, one of the things is I personally did not do that, though I did take a recording for EVP that was used by an Australian couple. So Leah Ramses runs a paranormal, or did for a while, show down in Australia. And so she requested that I do some EVP for them. And so I just decided one night, to set up a tape recording. And the interesting thing is, again, being a little cautious, I decided to smudge the area with sage. And that's basically, you just burn it like incense, burn dried sage, and it creates a smoke all around the Dybbuk box before playing a Jewish prayer protection and then actually recording. What's interesting is because we're actually almost the opposite. So I did this late at night, but we're kind of opposite. So it was daytime over in Australia and a day away, kind of a day ahead of us. And bottom line is that their home filled, when this was happening, it's almost like it projected the incident to them, the requester, and their house filled with smoke so badly they assumed their house was on fire. Though they could smell it with sage, they didn't know what was causing it. Basically got the garden hose, called the fire department, got everybody out of the house. And then it all dissipated. There was nothing burned, something like that. But it was interesting that the EVP came off with some very strong, basically sounds and voices. But again, they couldn't discern it, whether it was actually in, the Hebrew language or something. But they felt that they picked up something from it. And they used the film crew that does the Survivor series on the islands. Because, when you're in these jungles, it's hard to pick up sound of these people without sitting on them. And so the guy that does all this isolation and cleaning and stuff to get these clear sounds actually used this tape and said there was no doubt something was coming on there through vibration, but couldn't really determine the exact words, that there were things being chanted and repeated, but didn't know what they were, which I found that interesting. But I do believe that spirits, if they do exist on a different vibration plane. I mean, everything's quantum physics, and if you get the vibration high enough, if that's what an X-ray is about. Really, the reason we see through people is we're vibrating the waves and it breaks down the solids. And that's what we do with ultrasound and all these magnetic imaging is we're using vibration to look into people. So if vibration can break down solids, what level of vibrations can we get high enough to break out of this entire kind of dimension that we live in? So I do believe that if you're going the route to communicate with spirits, then vibration is the route to go, which these boxes are dealing with. So I think it has the potential.
Yeah. So how many Dybbuk boxes do you believe to be in existence?
See, that's the interesting thing. I know of 2, and they came from the same family. See, a Dybbuk box really, it was really a way of one family interpreting their religion. And so, though there have always been kinds of things like this done spiritually, there truly is only the Dybbuk box. And that was just the name that the family gave it. And so when someone says, well, we have a Dybbuk box too, well, you have something like it, but there really is only the one. It's almost like, there's if you believe in Christianity, there's Jesus Christ. Now there's other religions of other kind of, spiritual people, but, and some people say, well, Muhammad is really just the same story of Jesus Christ as is, you go through all the different, religions, they're all the same. And Mithras, if you go to the Greeks, and the Egyptians, Horus, that they're all the same guy. But in essence, there's supposedly only one Jesus Christ. There's no knockoff. There's not like, there's also this Jesus Christ. It's like, that's the way the Dybbuk box is. There really is only one, but there have been a lot of imitations or permeations of it. But it is really the only one, and the only one that does what it does, supposedly. Though in sympathetic magic and things like that, something created like something should have the power to do the same thing. So my thought is if you create something like it, you could get maybe some similar effects. So anybody out there in your listening audience could gather some familiar objects like hair, things that are very personal, coins to a date, writing some text, saying things. Again, vibration of sound is what creates the energy. And they could probably create a Dybbuk box of sorts that would maybe do the same thing.
Right. I was watching a program the other day. I should have written it down, but it was on Amazon. And it was your typical kind of ghost program. And this guy claimed that he owned his own Dybbuk box. So this straight away got my attention and decided to give it a watch. And he had an object that looked very much like your Dybbuk box. The biggest difference was that it looked like it had been sealed with what looked like glue.
Yeah,
all around the.
That's wax.
Or wax, yeah.
And it's whack because it would. And here's the weird thing about that, Luke. When I first received the Dybbuk box, I decided as a museum person to look at it with a black light. A black light would show if there were any any human material, any genetic material on it. Blood, hair, skin, anything that would be biological would pop out with a black light.
Right.
And so I scanned the whole thing with the black light. And one thing that also is things, it picks up wax. And there was a dribble of wax that could not be seen, that if you looked at it, you would never see it because it's almost clear. But under the black light, it changes it that it just looks, it was just as clear as a glass of milk, that there's this white dribble on it, which told me that the candle inside had actually been used, and someone without, noticing it, dribbled out a little bit of the wax. And all it confirmed with me was that, oh, this thing has actually been used. The candle has been lit and it's been prayed to. And so that's the only reference to wax. suddenly all these Dybbuk boxes are, globbed in wax. And it's like, I think they misunderstood. I mean, they just misunderstood what I was saying was there was one little drop, and that indicated the candle had been lit.
So it had nothing to do with sealing it or keeping anything trapped in there?
No, not that wax would make a difference, not in my opinion.
Right. It was interesting.
Here's the thing. What traps the Dybbuks to the box is physical objects. It traps itself. The bottom line is the spiritual cannot own possessions. So when you isolate, identify, and give them physical, it is something they cannot have, and they are attracted to that. And therefore, they stay with the stuff that you have identified as their belongings. And that's what traps them, is that it's more of a mental trap than an actual physical way to trap something like a spirit. What traps it is its desire to be with the things it cannot have that you have given it. And so, again, if you understand, that's why you're using these tokens, and then you're giving them so that they have an attraction. Rare metals, stones, human, hair and things are attractive. Nature, so everything that was in the Dybbuk box is attractive to a non-physical being, and that's what traps it. And so, it's not the amount of rope, chain, or wax or duct tape.
Good to know.
So these other Dybbuk boxes are all, I just think, people just having a good time.
Yeah. I mean, this one that I was seeing on this program, it was convincing. It looked real. They also had quite a large, old-looking Bible that was on the top, and also I think it was a cross. But some of the experiments that they were conducting on their Dybbuk box was temperature. They were checking to see if the temperature changed, and I think at some point it did. But the equipment they were using to do the test looked like, just by putting your hand near it, seemed to send it sky high. So, whether there was some manipulation involved. Was one of the things that came from their experimentation was when they were using the ghost box. Something that seemed to be a reoccurring theme was the date September. I think it was either the 23rd or the 28th. Does that date have any connection with anything that you've discovered?
Well, September 28th, again, not necessarily. October 28th was the day that the box was given supposedly as a gift to basically Ida Manis. But besides that, that's about it. I don't know. But again, as I mentioned, you could probably create something that would do something similar again. Or the other thing is NASA. There was a NASA guy who worked with metallurgists, so he works with crystals and things. He would measure the energy coming out of the real box versus the duplicate. He goes, there's energy out of both, but the higher energy is coming out of the real thing. He goes, and even that, it's odd that both are projecting an energy out of them, but it might be the combination of coins, granite, and things are all having this kind of creating a slew of stuff, and that's what projects the energy out. Because you've got, like I said, quartz can shoot out energy, and different metals, brass and copper and stuff. But they thought it was fascinating to see the amount of energy coming out, just that it was twice as high out of the real thing versus the copy.
Yeah, so. Which I suppose is always going to be the case. No, it's just, the reason why I decided to ask you these questions was because I know for people like me that are very interested in your story, we're going to be looking from as many different sort of source points for that information, and right. Obviously from my own experience that there's going to be a lot of, I guess, fakers and people just sort of out to put on a show, I guess.
Well, right, and maybe they're only just delusional, but the bottom line is there really is the only one. There may be other things, but there really is only one. And anyone who says our family's always had a Dybbuk box, that's crazy, because until the family identified it as that in the 1960s, the term doesn't even exist. I mean, Dybbuk does, which is a cleaving spirit, but not a container for a Dybbuk. That's a whole new way of looking at it. So,
well, I was going to say, actually, now that I actually remember that there was writing on their box, and I think the writing actually said in Hebrew it was contained a trapped soul.
Right, and maybe it did.
So one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, because we couldn't last time,
okay,
was the movie The Possession.
Okay.
How do you think that? What do you think about the film?
I thought the film was done really well. Of course, it was a number one hit, and oddly enough, I was actually in Aberdeen, Scotland when it was released. I had a lecture engagement on museum medical stuff, and so it was just interesting to be there at the opening of the movie, and people seemed to really enjoy it. It's made good money, over $100 million, and then it's been on cable and DVDs and all kinds of ways. So it was very successful. I was always surprised that Sam Raimi didn't right away create a sequel, because he talked about that he felt that he didn't get to tell the story the way he wanted to, and that he was going to, wanted to go back and start at the beginning and tell it in order correctly. But it, again, maybe other projects and stuff. I do find it interesting, though, that in February, like around February 13th or 14th, I get a Facebook message from some East Indian teenager, asking if I'm Jason Haxton of the Dybbuk Box. And I said, well, yeah. He goes, well, are you familiar with Ezra? Ezra, Dybbuk, D-Y-B-U-K. And it's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because they're going, well, India now has their own Dybbuk Box story about the Jewish people that on the Silk Road, the Marco Polo Silk Road, they peeled off and just stayed in India. So India was relearning about its Jewish heritage through these, travelers, for merchandise, these merchants who basically ended up creating their own little community, and they've been forgotten over time, or in the mass of millions of people, whatever. So the story of the Dybbuk Box was told to, it's told to tell the Holocaust story in Hollywood. It's told to tell the Silk Road merchant story in India. But it is still a soul that is trapped from this community and does these things. So the thing is, if you're familiar with Bollywood, every Indian movie, in the end, the guy gets the girl and everybody dances.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's the same movie over and over and over again. Well, the funny thing is this new young director, a guy much like you, Luke, decided, well, look, I'm going to tell the story of the Dybbuk Box. And they're like, what? Well, where's the dancing? So the thing is, they've never done horror or thrillers. I mean, it's not in their repertoire. And so this guy does this movie, and they're all scratching their heads going, what have you created? It's like, and he goes, well, I've created what I wanted to create, something different for our culture. And so the thing is, it's shot to the top as a number one hit, and they love it. They love being scared, and they love at the end, nobody dances.
Wow, yeah.
And so the funny thing is they've now had their first taste, and it went international. It was it still is one of the biggest movie hits. So now India has horror thanks to the Dybbuk Box.
Wow, as if it's not scaring enough people, eh?
Well, yeah, so now we've got millions and millions more. And, again, money's tight there. And these young people are going over and over and over to watch this show. So, and then that's why I'm glad we were supposed to talk yesterday. And we got off, on our communications, which is fine. Because yesterday, right after we would have talked, I get this email from Francois LaRussa. And he's a Cannes movie film winner and stuff. He has been wanting to do the story of the Dybbuk Box, picking it up kind of after the movie. And so he has just produced a trailer that he is now editing. So he did it this past weekend to raise funds to do the full-length feature. So again, people continue to want to tell this story. And I find that fascinating. Yeah.
That's kind of the original purpose of the Dybbuk Box.
Right. To really tell, in essence, in its case, the prayer was what was the cause of the Holocaust. And as I mentioned to you, what we've discovered is that though it's easy to say Hitler and the Nuremberg laws, actually the Nuremberg laws are American laws from 1924 through 1929. Nuremberg laws came in the 30s, the early 30s. And so Hitler basically used an American who is in the town where the Dybbuk Box came, Kirksville, Missouri, and he was breeding animals, and he used the research from breeding animals, which means you've got to kill a percentage of them. You've got to not mix certain percentages of them, and you won't want to have certain percentages of them come into your flock. So sterilization, marriage restriction, and immigration restriction were three laws we set up between 24 and 1929, enacted in all of our states. And we were actually doing great harm to people using laws by a guy who bred animals. Hitler took these laws, created them as the Nuremberg laws verbatim, and then used them across the Jewish population and others, and decimated all kinds, of millions. So if you wanted to know what the story of the Dybbuk Box was, it was to come to the place of the beginning. And the beginning is basically a farmer who could tell the difference between chickens and humans and wrote laws, basically for humans based on research on chickens. And so it is kind of interesting that it wants its story to be told kind of as beware yourselves that you don't fall into this trap. Humans are different from animals. Is basically, and we are. Animals come into this world, they know everything. They can survive. A chicken that's hatched from an egg can, from the day it's hatched, find food, drink, and grow without any assistance. A baby born can't do anything. We learn all the way to our death. And hopefully the reason we learn is we take that information with us. This is a journey of a spirit learning imperfection to take back to its perfect world. So that's kind of what it's about, the journey of life.
Yeah, it is interesting, like you said, that so many people can't help but just get absorbed and end up sharing the story, lead into someone else investigating into it, and so on and so forth, which is just, it's fantastic. And the research that you've done in itself, I mean, for anybody listening that hasn't actually read the book yet, seriously go and buy it right now, because it's incredibly interesting.
Well, Luke, I think you're very fair-minded, and I hope that we've told the story for someone who's not really familiar with it or has a little familiarity, that we've touched on the areas that of our interest about this unique artifact and what it has the potential to do, and why I'm somewhat at peace with it. But I'm still cautious, as it's better to live your life and not be wishing for things, because often when we get what we want, it's not the way we wanted it. So again, I'm pleased that you give the opportunity to really give good, not just scary, let's just tell something scary, but really make us think about what we can project into things and do with things in this world we're still learning about. There's so much that we don't know about. And so how vibration, how bringing artifacts, how our thoughts can actually make things happen. And that's what this box is all about, as a focal point, as a way to kind of bring that into kind of like a laser point and actually make things happen, to organize and solidify an idea and a message, and then actually have an effect on the whole world. And I think we can do that as individuals.
Going back to the original story of the Dybbuk Box, I think it's quite interesting that the story starts not from the Jewish owner, but the guy that ended up owning it for a bit and was just using the Dybbuk Box to kind of scare his friends and things like that. And then, all of a sudden, all these terrible things start to happen to him. And those terrible things went on to the next owner, then it went on to you. And it wasn't until your research that has uncovered, its history, where it's come from, and you've tried to understand it, that those effects have kind of, well, they're not so negative enough anymore that someone's prepared to put it on display in a museum.
Right, and they've diminished them, and I think that's the difference. Is we can look at a poisonous snake and the venom as being evil and horrible, blah blah blah, or we can look at, if we take that snake and we work with that venom, we may actually help neurological disorders. So is it good or bad? It really is. As we move into the paranormal world, I think it's scary. I don't understand it, therefore it's evil. It's like, well, no, what we need to come back is understanding might bring clarification that it might not be good or bad. It might just be, it's in the hands of how you use it. Nuclear energy is great. Nuclear bombs are bad, but it's still nuclear. And so I do think it's, how do we interpret and understand and then work with something? And I think that's the way most of the paranormal world is there's a lot yet to be learned, but going at it from a more open and optimistic perspective, we may be able to use it for benefit and not just be, scared. And again, the lack of understanding is what usually makes us kind of ignorant and scared of things.
Yeah. So for anybody that's listening that wants a second movie, is there any way that those people can go and contribute or pay some money in order to sort of escalate the movie production, like a crowdfunding thing or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, go fund it. Well, no, I'm the director. I mean, he's going to take the way they usually do is people with a lot of money can say, look, here, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. If you give me $1 million, and I'm going to show you what the trailer so you can see what the movie's going to be kind of like, then you give me $1 million. And then when the movie's done, if it's successful, which we think it will be, you will actually go home with $2 million. I mean, worst case scenario, you just get your money back, but you might actually get more back. Now, granted, if it's a flop, you lose your money. But it's not quite gambling, because if you've got a good record, it's pretty positive. And so that's how Raimi, producers never use their own money, even though they have lots of it. They want to use someone else's money just to make sure there's no risk and all profit. And so at this point, there's no GoFundMe or anything like that. But I think that people can right now, because Ezra's been out a while, go and watch the Hindi version of the Dybbuk Box, which I think is, again, will give you some more information about it and kind of fun.
And going back to the possession, I'm asking this for myself.
Okay.
Why didn't they stick to the true story with the Dybbuk Box? Why did they decide to go the way that they went?
Yeah, and of course, and the fun thing about you guys in the UK, you actually cleaned it up, because our standards for what's acceptable in the United States is way off of what you think is acceptable for young children. So there is the unrated version and the very rated version, so that what we think is the general population can watch it. So if you pick up the Possession in the UK, which you can still find it, you'll find that there is the uncut version and the cut version. But the reason why it's kind of all over the place, Sam Raimi wasn't sure, because it was a new topic, it was a new idea, if it would actually even be a success. So he kind of just threw everything into it from the whole story, though he would have preferred to go chapter by chapter. He said that he might not ever get a chance to move towards the story. So he kind of cherry picked, as we call it, and pulled stuff together. And even then, he kind of watched how he presented it, because he didn't want to offend, being Jewish himself, the Jewish population. To have a backlash from the rabbis and stuff, to be, basically kicked out and ostracized by your own group. So the bottom line is he was very cautious. And he also then threw it all, because he thought, I might only get one chance at this. So that's why it kind of is it's a lot like the story, but it's a little disjointed in that. Because his plan was then to go back and retell the story chapter by chapter once he had the approval and the audience, and then just never got back to it, too busy, and he's done great stuff. So who knows? But yeah, so as you know, you've come up to the point where the newest movie is now in the works, and I do think something will come out from it. Again, it shouldn't be hard to track. And the funny thing is, Sam Raimi's sitting on a script ready to go. He just doesn't have the money he wants, and he's not going to put his own money into it, even though he's made good money. It's just the way you do it. So he's sitting on a script with the director ready to go.
Wow.
But he's really picky. That's why he got the rights in 2004. The movie didn't come out until 2012. So literally for 8 years, he worked on script and this and that and actors and stuff. 8 years is a long time to produce a movie.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Especially one without a huge budget. I mean, it was pretty much telling a story, and the props are all real things. It's not like you're creating Spider-Man. So I think it's interesting that now it's been coming on 5 years in August since the movie came out, and he's got everything ready. Is he going? The thing is, will he be prompted now that other people are starting to tell the story? Will he want to tell the story more, or will he just say, "Oh, never mind"?
I hope he decides to share it more.
Yeah, because he's good. He tells a good story, so we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to say, personally, I really loved the movie. I just didn't find it quite... It just didn't have the same effect on me as the book did. And maybe that's just because, typically with a book, more is left to the imagination. But, I felt after, or as I was reading the book, I had my own experiences with that. Sleep disturbances, weird dreams, things like that. I never got that same effect with the movie. And, I don't think I heard anybody else did, So, yeah, who knows? If I get my wish, we'd have a movie that was more to your true story.
Well, hopefully, maybe the new director will do that. But here's the other thing about the story versus the movie is I really literally keep a daily journal, so it should have felt like it was happening because I was really just taking from the book what had already been written from the experience. And so I know a lot of people said it felt like it was actually occurring. I said, well, in essence, it was because nothing was ever put into the book that hadn't occurred yet. It was really that day, that experiences, and all I knew at that time. So it does feel like it's very real and happening because you can't really guess what the next page is because it wasn't written that way. It was written out of a diary. So the next day, things may be completely different. And so what you anticipate doesn't happen. And when you know the end of the story and then tell it, you don't tell it as good as when you really don't know the end. And so I think that's why the book comes off better. And I thank you for kind of telling people that they might enjoy reading the book. And so we'll see. We'll see how it comes off in the new movies.
Well, I certainly can't wait. Well, thank you, Jason. Is there anything else that you'd like to get across to people or anything for them to check out?
Well, Luke, I just appreciate your giving this opportunity for people to learn more about another dimension of the supernatural and paranormal. I think your Planet Inside is amazing what you've done with it.
And
wish you the best. Wish you the best of success. I think you're on the right track, and I think you're providing good, fair information. So thanks for having me on, and we'll do an update maybe when the next movie comes out.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, thanks for your time, Jason. Very much appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's it for this week's episode of Planet Inside. Just want to say another massive thank you to Jason Haxton for coming on the show, and make sure you head over to his website dybbukbox.com for more information, and don't forget to head over to our website as well, planetinside.co.uk. Enjoy the rest of your week. We burning one hell of a summer.